Hi everybody. Welcome to the very first episode of Agricultural Pursuits. My name is John Lebeaux and I have the privilege of being Governor Baker's and Lieutenant Governor Polito's Commissioner of the Massachusetts Department of Agricultural Resources, or MDAR for short. MDAR can trace its roots back to 1852. That's actually 10 years before the U.S. Department of Agriculture was established, when the state established the Massachusetts Board of Agriculture. At MDAR, we have a two-pronged mission: to keep our food supply safe and secure, and to keep Massachusetts agriculture environmentally and economically sound. We do that through our four programmatic divisions: Agricultural Markets, which is our promotional, informational, and educational division; Animal Health, in which we protect farm and domestic animals; Agricultural Conservation and Technical Assistance, where we provide farmland preservation and technical assistance and grant programs; and our Crop and Pest Services Division, which focuses on pesticides, insects, licensing and registration of nurseries, fertilizers, animal feed, and pet food. In today's episode, we're going to talk about another program in our Crop and Pest Services Division, and in future episodes, we'd like to introduce you to more of our programs, our constituents, and our partners. So we hope to be talking with farmers, with nursery and greenhouse professionals, with people in the pesticide business, and with educators and other government officials. But today we want to talk about pollinators, particularly honeybees. Here in Massachusetts, over 45% of our crops rely on pollinators for that food to be produced, for those crops to be produced. There are approximately 4,500 honey beekeepers managing approximately 45,000 hives across the Commonwealth. Pollinator species provide significant environmental benefits that are necessary for maintaining healthy, diverse ecosystems and to produce valuable products, including honey, propolis, royal jelly, and wax. Now, most everyone has heard that pollinator health is in decline. There are multiple things affecting our bees: diseases, viruses, both pests and pesticides, and climate change, just to list a few. So I thought today in our first episode we could have a little Bee 101 session. So I brought our bee team along. Whether or not you keep bees, I think it's important for all of us to know a little bit more about them and to know about what all of us can do to help foster their survival. So at this time, I'd like to introduce Taryn Lascola, MDAR's Director of Crop and Pest Services. Taryn oversees our apiary program, and she and the bee team can talk a little bit more about the program and the very important role that these pollinators play in all of our lives.
The apiary program's mission is to ensure the health of honeybees in Massachusetts. It serves as both a regulatory and an extension program. We currently have 4 seasonal inspectors and 1 chief inspector. The inspectors conduct inspections with commercial beekeepers that are transporting bees in and out of the state, and also hobbyist beekeepers when they request an inspection. During these inspections, the inspector is looking for disease, pathogens, and pests. They also provide education, outreach, advice, and suggestions to the beekeepers. The program also provides education and outreach to larger groups, such as beekeeping associations, pesticide applicators, garden groups, and any other individuals or groups that are interested or vested in the beekeeping world. The apiary program recently released the Massachusetts Pollinator Plan, which speaks to the decline of pollinator health. The plan provides suggestions and advice to all stakeholders involved regarding things that they can do in order to improve pollinator health. The program is consistently growing, and we are constantly looking for ideas and suggestions on ways that we can help our beekeepers, our stakeholders, and of course our bees. I would now like to introduce to you Dr. Kim Skirm, who is our Chief Apiary Inspector, who will be going through a hive inspection and also be providing us with some basic Bee 101.
Located behind us is one of the 2 state apiaries we have in Massachusetts. This is a collaboration between the University of Massachusetts Amherst and the Massachusetts Department of Agricultural Resources Apiary Program. This particular apiary, if you can notice, is located on the campus of University of Massachusetts at the Agricultural Learning Center farm. So it's appropriately located to provide pollination services, not only for the farm, but also a wonderful opportunity for beekeepers and other stakeholders in the general public to be more up close with honeybees and to learn more about them through our many educational events that we do throughout the season. This particular apiary is one of 2 that we have. This services the western part of the state and central Mass, and we also have an apiary located in the eastern part of the state at the Exis Technical High School. That's a new apiary that we opened up this season. The apiary located behind me was opened last year, so it's the summer of 2016. And currently we do have the 9 colonies that we're managing, and then the 6 colonies at the Essex Apiary. So we have a total of 15 colonies at our state apiaries. So this location and this particular apiary, along with the apiary in the eastern part of the state, is managed by a highly trained and very dedicated team of students, as well as the staff on the farm, and then also the staff from our apiary program for the Massachusetts Department of Agricultural Resources, from MDAR. And so this particular location is definitely a labor of love. We have had a lot of collaboration from the groups at both locations, the technical high school and the university, to help not only create this space, so everything you see behind us, from building the boxes to actually creating the fence to keeping the area mowed and cultivated, as well as managing the health of the bees. So we're in for a treat today. We're going to actually go through some of the colonies and give you a very close bee's eye view, if you will, of what honeybees look like at this particular location. So before we go into the state apiary and visit some of the honeybee colonies today, we need to think about personal protective equipment for ourselves as working with the bees, so that we're most confident, and also that we are respectful in our work with bees. So things to think about for protecting your body. The first will be your hands. So there's a couple different options. These are leather gloves that are available commercially that you can get in whatever size that fits you best in your hands. And these are really great for beginning beekeepers or folks that are just starting out, who may not feel as comfortable working with the bees or having them on their hands. And then once you feel more comfortable, you can graduate to something a little bit thinner and a little bit more form-fitting, like these disposable nitrile gloves, which would give you a lot better grip and a lot more close contact with the bees, and maybe allow for a little easier maneuvering. But at the same token, a really great barrier to protect against any issues. And also, especially for the disposable gloves, it gives you a great option if you have disease in your colony to be able to manage that in the most hygienic way possible by getting rid of these materials. Whereas these leather gloves, if you do get something that's unmanageable from a disease perspective, you actually have to destroy these, and so you would have to get a new pair. Now, for the rest of your body, you need to think about something that covers maybe the whole the rest of the parts of your body that could be in contact with bees. So this is a full-size bee suit with a veil attached, and it has the coverall, so that would cover all the rest of your arms and legs. And then of course you want to make sure that you have closed-toed shoes on. And if you still feel a little uncomfortable with this amount of covering, you can use some duct tape to cover up any openings that would occur, having this equipment on. And if you do feel a little more comfortable and you want to graduate from something that's not as covering in your body, you can do a half version of this, like what Taryn is wearing here, which is just a half jacket here, or half suit with the coverall material, and then also a veil on top to keep your head protected.
So Kim, if I was going to go into the apiary like this, would jeans be okay to wear, or should I wear a different type of leg covering, or could I go in with shorts if I wanted to?
So this would actually be perfect. So you've got long pants on, you've got your jacket, you've got your veil, you're putting on your gloves, and then also you've got closed-toed shoes on with the long pants. So that's a perfect, a protective covering for going into the apiary.
And then if I wanted to use the other types of gloves, are there a particular kind of plastic or is color that I need to be aware of that would either bother the bees or do harm to bees, or does it really matter if as long as they're gloves?
So especially if you do something like these disposable gloves that are much thinner than the gloves like you're wearing, there is no real issue or concern about different materials that you're working with. Obviously, if you have allergies to latex or things like that, but as far as the bees are concerned, these won't present any issues being negative to the bees at all, color-wise as well. So there's a lot of options of these available that you might want to consider if you want to graduate to something a little less controlling and covering of your body. So yeah, these are great options. So before we get started, now that we've got our personal protective equipment, we also need to add some tools to our toolkit before we become beekeepers here in the state apiary. The two most important things that we need to work safely with bees are some sort of hive tool. So you can see here there's two different designs that I have, and it's always great to have a backup. So I'm going to take 2 hive tools in with me today when we go through the bees. The additional thing that we need that's really critical when you work with bees is having some sort of smoker. And you can see the smoker that I have here is just a basic design. You can get these from a commercial supplier. The key to having a really good smoker is having good fuel. So you want to make sure that the fuel you have burns and that it's a really cool burn, so it doesn't harm the bees or cause any disruption. So you can see the different options I have for fuel. We've got some burlap here that you can purchase. We also have some sumac heads that you can actually get around your house near, if there's an open area. Then birch bark is another great tool for having as a fuel for your smoker. And then finally, You can also use just pine straw. So a lot of things are available for you to use as fuel, and they burned really well, and they also allow you to have a really nice relationship with the bees as you're going through them. So we're going to get our smoker started. I'm going to put a little bit of fuel inside of it, and then I've got my lighter here. So I'm going to start with my pine straw. We're going to light our smoker. You can see we've got a really pretty good flame at this point. So now the key to having a lit smoker while you're working your bees is you obviously don't want to flame like this the entire time. So what you want to do is to be able to get a nice flame started, puff a little bit of air into it, and then you want to have a little bit of a substance that's going to go on top that acts as kind of a barrier to that, and then also will give you a really nice smoke. So you can see at this point we've got a little bit of that birch bark in with our pine straw. We've got a nice level of smoke, a little bit of flame, but I'm going to stop puffing air in, let it go out a hair. Now we can put our lid on, and as you can see when I do the air going through, it's a really nice level of smoke. The last thing I'm going to do before we get started is to make sure this is a very cool temperature-wise smoke. So we don't want a really hot smoke. We don't want to burn the bees or cause disruption. So whatever fuel you decide to use, make sure it does produce a very cool puff of smoke out the end. If it isn't cool, you can take a little bit of vegetation that's green and put this on top of whatever you have in your smoker as kind of a deterrent, and it'll act as a nice filter to let it be a little bit cooler in temperature. So at this point we've got our hive tool, we've got our smoker, and we're ready to get in some bees. So I'm excited to share this with you. Let's get started.
Okay, so here we are with hive number 21 in the State Apiary, and Kim's gonna start showing us what happens during a hive inspection, and during that will kind of give us the basics of some bee biology and Bee 101.
Awesome. So let's get started. If you notice the front of the colony, we've got bees entering and exiting out of an area here in the front of the box, and I'm just going to give them a couple of puffs of smoke just to let them know we're going to come in and take a look, and then we'll take off our covers here. So this is our outer cover that's coming off. And we've got an inner cover as well, so it's got a hole in the center of it. So I'm just going to give, again, 2 small puffs of smoke to let the bees then know that we're going to come inside.
Kim, what does the smoke do?
So the smoke is a great way to sort of calm the bees. It allows them to retreat back into the colony as a way for them to have associated with working, having a beekeeper, because these are obviously domesticated bees that have been kept. So you can see a couple bees are coming up now. This is a great population level for, after smoking them, having a lot of the bees going down. This is also a fairly small colony. This was a swarm that we collected this year here in the apiary. You can see very few bees in here. They're just moving up to this top deep box that we've got, this larger box that's on top. I just put this on this morning, so you can see they've already started to explore this and make it their home. But let's pull out a frame and let's take a look at what they've done just in the few hours they've had the box here, and let's see if they've done any work for us. I'm just going to take this hive tool and move it between the frames, and then I'm going to slowly pull out a frame here. And then we're going to rotate this because the cells are at an angle. If you see this, when we rotate it, you can actually see some wet substance inside some of these cells. So the workers have already started collecting nectar from nearby flowers and putting it inside these frames. And that's just within the short time this box has been on here this morning. So this is going to be a really active colony here in a couple of weeks as we go through the fall season. You can see the bees are also working this side of the frame.
And so these are all worker bees?
These are all worker bees, yep. So these are all females. You can see all the different colors. We've got some darker ones, some lighter ones. So there's different subspecies of the bees that we have, or different varieties. But this particular colony has a Russian hybrid variety queen in it. But you can see she's had a variety of mating with all the different colors of the males that we've got. That's representative of the different colored workers that are inside the colony.
And so I see some of these bees with their heads in the cells. So what are they doing there? Like this one right here.
So these girls are cleaning. So this is a new box that just we put on this morning. So they're going through and cleaning out this frame to be able to use it. And then a lot of these bees could also be coming back with any nectar or anything they found, checking it out, making sure the cell's appropriate size, and then getting ready to use it for resources. So we'll put this frame back in. And what we'll do is we're going to go down to the second box, because this is a new box from this morning, so it's not going to have much going on besides that little bit of food. But this bottom box is going to have a lot more activity. So we're just going to take this top box off. I'm going to set it on our stand here in the apiary. So now that we've taken off the top box, I'm just going to do, there's not a lot of bees coming up, but I'm just going to do 1 or 2 puffs of smoke just to let them know that we are still working the colony. And then what you want to do when you work bees, just knowing, because that earlier I put that box on, there wasn't going to be much brood or young bees, so eggs, larvae, or pupa inside the colony. You would never start by pulling out any of the center frames, because that's where the queen would focus her brood rearing or rearing of baby bees. So you would want to work with the outside frames, and usually the outermost frames are fairly affixed to the side of the box. So we tend to work with the frame right next to it. So all of these in the box that you see are frames, and each one of them is removable. You saw that earlier when we pulled one out. And this is where honeybees make their home. So we're going to pull out a second frame, and our goal is to see if we can find resources in the colony and or look at the brood population to see if they're healthy.
And these are all things that you do when you and the inspectors are looking at the hives?
We do, yep. So we'd come out, we'd go through the colony, and just like yourself, you'd be a beekeeper that we're visiting, and we would be able to share this experience with them and answer any questions they have, and also talk about the health of their bees. So you can see from this frame, very similar to the one that we pulled out in the top box, you've got some of this liquid substance in the cells. So each one of the cells that the bees have built out with wax that they've excreted and molded into this 3D structure. Now they're storing, in this case, you can see that liquid, that's nectar they've collected from flowers. So it's fresh nectar. And then once they evaporate the water content off of the nectar, it turns really viscous, and this is what turns into honey. So you can see how on this side of the frame, you've got the same cells, but they've got a wax capping on top of them. That's honey that the bees have actually come in, brought into the colony as nectar, and then fanned with their wings all the water off of that nectar and turned it into honey. So they're creating resources for the winter for storage. And you can see on the back of this frame, a very, very similar behavior, where they've got the nectar coming in, you've got bees that are helping to store that nectar in clean cells so new bees can bring in the nectar, and then you've got other bees that are up here at the top going through and capping off the cells that have nectar that's been basically evaporated and used for honey. So what we're going to do is, because we've got 10 frames in our box, we need to have a little space to move around. So I'm going to leave this frame outside of the box because it doesn't have anything on it but food stores. So in this case, we need room to be able to move these frames around so we can look at additional bees and additional brood in the colony. So I'm going to take my hive tool and slide a frame over. Now there's not much happening on this frame. You can see they're just starting to build it out. So when I say build it out, we can see them, they've been given this sort of wax sheet, a plastic sheet with a wax coating. And from that, they take that and the structure that's there, that stencil form of that hexagonal shape, and they add wax to it and build it out to a 3D structure. Now, what's awesome about this frame, Taryn, is you can see the pollen they're collecting. So look at all those different colors the bees are visiting, and that tells you all the different types of plants they're going to, in addition to the nectar they're bringing back. So you've got purple, you've got orange, yellow, there's a little green in there. They're really going out and being super productive in this area.
Very cool.
So after they bring the pollen back into the colony, they add a little bit of digestive enzymes and also a little nectar to it, and they turn it into something called bee bread. So that's a little bit different. Very similar to how they're reprocessing that nectar and turning it into honey. So in this case, if you look down in the cell here, the bee bread is a little bit different because it looks like it's got a little shiny or kind of wet appearance to the top of it versus a cell that just has pollen, because it's a little bit more, you can see powdery shaped or kind of a different structure than the bee bread cells.
So the nectar becomes honey and the pollen becomes bee bread.
That's the goal, yep. So that's the bees' needs in essence. That's the food they need to be able to eat. So the pollen gives them the protein that they need, and of course the nectar gives them the carbohydrate source. And so adult bees eat these resources in addition to the brood. So the brood are anything that's not an adult bee. So eggs, larvae, pupae, and then of course, anything that those three life stages. So now we've got some food frames. Those are frames that we just pulled out that have food on them that the bees have collected. What we want to see are some frames with some babies on them. So we want to see some brood frames. So I'm going to move over here a little bit.
And Kim, would they normally have the brood in the center?
It's normally in the center of the colony box, and they do that because it's a nice way for them to keep the climate at a steady temperature so the brood, the baby bees, can develop. So you can take a look. This is another food frame. It's really nice to see on this black frame, Taryn, because it's got a lot of viscous cells. You can see where they're bringing the nectar back, and you can really see the different shapes, the different colors in here of how they're doing the wax capping over the honey. on this black frame. So there's that. And again, these are all worker bees. So let's get to a frame. We know they've got a lot of food, right? So that's a good health indicator for the bees. Let's see if they've got any younger bees. And we also want to make sure we have a queen in this colony. You can see here, Taryn, on this frame, I'll show you. Here's the queen right now.
Is that the one with the white spot?
You got it, yep. So this is our queen in the colony, and you can see she's on a frame along with worker bees. In addition to this, we've finally got capped brood. So this particular frame, you can see all the cells, these cells that I'm pointing to in here, this is all what we call capped brood, or bees that are in the pupal stage of development that will eventually emerge as a new bee. So there's actually several new bees that have emerged on this frame that have birthdays today.
Yeah.
And this is including one right here. So she's probably maybe less than an hour old. And then we've got another one here, also emerged today. So we've got a lot of birthdays on this frame. So that means we've got a lot of bees emerging, which means we've got a healthy colony. So we see our queen, we see capped brood. And then the last thing we're going to look for, especially on this frame, is make sure that we've got all stages of development. So I want to look for eggs, I want to look for larvae, and of course we can see the pupae here with these capped brood. So if you take a look in this corner, this is all eggs that this queen has laid. And we see there's not a lot of room on this frame because there's a lot of capped brood, but it's a good amount of space for her to at least be able to fill in some of the holes that aren't being occupied, some of the cells. So she's put eggs in this corner, and then if you look down here, she actually has larvae in this area as well. So she's using every bit of this frame, which is great as a way to enhance the colony by having additional development. So the queen is much larger than the worker bees, Taryn. You can see how elongated her abdomen is, or the lower part of her body, compared to the worker bees around her. And then you can also see how when she's moving through the colony box, she usually has a group of bees called attendants that follow her around. Actually, one's feeding her right now and caring for her. So the queen doesn't do anything on her own but lay eggs. So she's pretty much cared for 24/7 by worker bees in the colony. So this colony looks very healthy. What we'll do is we'll put this cell back in. You can see them feeding her one last time there. And we've seen all the different life stages. We've seen capped brood. We've seen good food stores. And then I'm going to pull out one last frame. Wow, look at that, just to take a look. And it also looks really great. We have a queen cell on this frame. So this is what a cell looks like when it's going to turn into a queen. And so we're going to open it up and see if there's anything inside of it. And there's nothing in it, so it's an empty cell. So we don't have to worry about them trying to requeen. But we can see a lot of larvae on this frame, an older stage pupae that are about to emerge under these cappings that are going to be all worker bees. And then on the back side, you can see very similar development. So this is a really nice colony. It's going to have a really nice booming population over the next couple of weeks and get ready for winter.
Kim, why would a colony requeen?
So requeening in a colony is something that happens fairly common, especially if for some reason the queen is she's old or sick or diseased in some way. The worker bees will detect that and then actually go through and take an egg that is a female egg and use it to requeen the colony. And also they'll do it in the earlier part of the season when swarming occurs, because that's the natural reproductive biology of the honeybee colony. So that's where the colony basically creates a new queen, and then the new queen will stay behind in the colony box and generally keep about 50% of the workforce of worker bees. And the old queen will leave the colony box and produce a swarm or a group of bees with a queen inside of it that hang from a tree or a fence or a structure for a short amount of time, and then they'll find a new home to occupy. So the queen is really important to the functioning of the colony. They need to have, a colony of honeybees needs to have a really good queen that's able to lay eggs and reproduce to create all the brood that's inside of the box, because that's the only individual that's reproducing, making new bees inside of a colony. So it's really important to have a new queen, or to have a good functional queen in the colony.
Now this is a healthy hive, so when you're doing a hive inspection, you're looking for diseases, pests, and pathogens, as well as how strong the hive is, right?
Yep.
So what kind, if this is a healthy one, it's probably hard to point out, but what kinds of things are you looking for when it comes to those diseases and those pests and things like that?
So, especially for us, we're looking for, and this is going to sound a little silly, but anything that's abnormal. So you can see, once you identify what normal looks like, so i.e. I pull a frame out and I've got really nice filled in, uniform pattern of brood on this frame. There's not a lot of empty cells. There's not a lot of spots that's open. This all looks normal. So anything that would be abnormal jumps out at you. Also, I'm looking for larvae. So larvae are a really good indicator of disease because if they're different colored or if they're a different shape or if they're squishy or mucky, that can indicate a bacterial disease or in a lot of other issues that bees can have. And so those are things that we're looking for. So anything that really sticks out as being abnormal in a colony. So as far as disease goes and the health of the bees, we really want to examine the brood and look at those larvae because that's a big indicator for us, and also look for and make sure they have a healthy queen and good food stores.
What about the different types of pests that might come into a hive?
So that's a great question. Unfortunately, honeybees they have a lot of issues that plague them, from pesticides to pathogens, and those would be bacterial, fungal, and also viruses. And then, of course, the pests themselves that you're speaking of, so something like small hive beetle, or in this case, the mites that can plague them. So tracheal mites that are interior to the bee's body, which are not as common as they used to be. And then, of course, varroa mites, which are very, very common and have really changed the way that people are keeping bees. And so for this case, we would do an alcohol wash using a subset of workers in the colony to see our varroa mite levels. And if the level is above our threshold, then we would think about doing some integrated pest management for our colony.
So overall, Hive 21, thumbs up?
Thumbs up, it looks great.
All
Yep,
right.
so now we've got 9 more to make sure that it look wonderful in the apiary, and our day's work is just starting.
All
So,
right.
yeah.
So thank you so much, Kim, for showing us what happens during a hive inspection and giving us some basic bee information, Bee 101. I do have a question for you, though. Aside from disease and pests and pathogens, what other things are you concerned about regarding honeybee health?
So that's a great question. There's a lot of factors that go into effects on honeybees, and one of the ones that we considered the last couple of years here in Massachusetts is becoming more of an issue is actually bear attacks on apiaries. So we've seen the bear population increase quite a bit in the state, and they've definitely went after some of the honeybee hives as a resource. So we've been working quite a bit closely with Department of Fisheries and Wildlife to get some good resources out for beekeepers so they can get some more information about how to mitigate and handle if their apiary gets attacked by bears. The other couple issues that I think we need to really focus on and think about more is our climate change. We've had a lot of different climate effects the last couple of seasons, especially last year with the drought that we had in our state, and then this year obviously we've had sort of the opposite with all the rain. And then more importantly, forage. So bees need a lot of forage resources, both in the quantity of resource and then temporarily throughout the season. So they always need something in bloom to be able to have a good food resource for them, to be able to survive and get enough brood, and of course have good winter stores. And then the last, which is something that's been in the headlines quite a bit and a lot of data is being collected on, is pesticide use. So I was really hoping that we could chat a little bit more about that, and you can tell me, especially with your knowledge about pesticides in Massachusetts.
Sure. So when we talk about pesticide use and we talk about and bees, there's a few things that we need to think about. One of the first things I tell people, whether it's a homeowner or whether it's a licensed pesticide applicator, is integrated pest management. Integrated pest management, or IPM, is basically a way of handling a pest issue where it takes a look at the big picture. Essentially, it starts from the very beginning of identifying a pest and then sort of working your way up the ladder to what the threshold is for that pest, and then what you're going to do to control that pest, whether it's through cultural, mechanical, or physical methods, or even chemical methods. And if you get to that chemical method, that pesticide piece, it's looking at sort of your big toolbox of things to use and choosing the best product for the best issue. The whole purpose of IPM and main thought with IPM is reducing pesticide use and reducing the impacts to the environment and to humans. A lot of what comes into IPM, which I think gets lost a lot of times, is once you've controlled a problem, is always going back to take a look at what created the problem in the first place. Because if you still have that environment, then chances are you're going to have that issue again. So a good example I always use is mosquitoes. You could treat for mosquitoes using a number of different measures, whether it's pesticides, organic, or sort of more of the conventional, or using the repellents and things like that. But if you don't eliminate what's breeding the mosquitoes, which is usually standing water, then each and every couple weeks you're going to get another round of mosquitoes. And so that's really the main theme is if you're going to control your pest, always figure out what's making that pest a happy home for it. The second piece of pesticides when dealing with them is choosing the right product. in reading the label is really, really important. A lot of labels will have precautions or prohibitions regarding bees, and so it's really important to read the label and follow the label directions. We cannot stress that enough. That product was made to work in the manner that it's been prescribed, which is on the label. More is not always better, which is sometimes what we see out there. So with the homeowner use, it's really, really important. Read the product, follow the label, and look for those little things that might indicate that it might be a little bit, it might be toxic to bees, or there might be certain times or ways that you need to apply it in order to avoid impacting the bees. The third piece is best management practices, which is know your area. If you've got a beekeeper in the area, go and have a chat with them and talk to them and learn a little bit about how they keep their bees. Using pesticides either first thing in the morning or later on the evening when perhaps the bees are in the hive, so they won't come into contact with that product, is always key. And just sort of, being aware of your surroundings and looking at the area that you're gonna use a pesticide on before you use that pesticide to see if there are any bees flying around. And those are just some of the basic points regarding pesticide use. Again, whether it's an applicator or whether it's a homeowner, we stress this to our applicators. If a homeowner is hiring a company, we always stress to the homeowners to make sure you're hiring a licensed individual that's trained, and discuss these issues with them and have a discussion with them before they go ahead and make an application. So you did mention forage, so I'm going to just kick a question back to you on the forage end. So if somebody wants to help the bees but they don't want to be a beekeeper, what are the certain things that they can do as far as planting to create some forage or create some pollinator friendly areas for them to come and grab some of that nectar and pollen?
Oh, of course. There's a lot of things they can purchase. If they want to do native plants, there's a plant list that are out there. If they want to do ornamental or plants they can purchase that aren't native, there's also a plant list for those. One first resource that I would direct folks to is our brand new pollinator plan that we just made for Massachusetts. It's got a lot of great resources in it, Taryn, and you'll find that there's different sections for homeowners and for land managers and beekeepers, farmers, sort of anyone, gardeners that are interested in planting for pollinators. There's a lot of resources in there about what specific plants they can put into their yard, the space requirements, sort of how they grow best, and then also thinking more in successional, like you want to have plants that bloom throughout the season. So you don't want to have a sort of a snapshot of bloom. You want to have plants that are going to be available the whole season for bees and all the other pollinators, so that way they can constantly have a food resource to use. And then the other piece I'm thinking about forage is also the bigger picture. So with native bees and native pollinators, they also need a place to nest. So they need places they can create nests in the habitat, and that can be done with forage. It can also be done with how people manage their land and their yard. And then the final thing is making sure that they have access to water resources, whatever that looks like, whether it's a bird feeder that's available or, running water, that's fresh water, a brook or a stream. And then the final thing is overwintering sites. So, thinking about how you keep your yard and how you manage the space. And all these pieces are really critical in providing not only for the honeybees, but definitely for native pollinators as we get more broad and think about pollinators in our state. So yeah, this is great. Thank you for your time today, and thanks for having me out.
Thank you, Kim. This has been great.
Yeah.
Well, that's it for our very first episode of Agricultural Pursuits. Thank you very much for watching. We hope you check out and learn more about MDAR. You could just Google the letters MDAR, and that'll take you to our website. We're also available on Facebook and Twitter. I do want to thank the good folk at Waltham Mac TV for helping us tell a little bit of our story to you. So we do hope to come back with future episodes, but today I ask you all to think about what every one of us can do to help our bees.